I'm Courtney Ingham, and I am a Western tropical astrologer. I offer weekly astrology reports every Monday featuring the planetary and lunar energies for the week ahead. All times mentioned are in Eastern Standard Time. Becoming a subscriber is free, and all subscribers get additional free content. Becoming a paid subscriber is only $5 a month and helps to support this podcast. Paid subscribers receive discounts off of my readings and other offerings. Enjoy the show. Hello, Astro friends. This is your Astro forecast for August the 7th through the 13th. And this week we will have a lot of reflective, introspective energy as we are working with the energy around our wounds and around relationships. And I'll talk more about this in the planetary aspects part of this transmission. Due to the retrogrades that we have going on, which several of our planets are retrograding currently, and this is a theme that we've had going on for several years now, where the second half of the year we do have several planets that go into retrograde, so it's not uncommon, but also due to the fact that we have several longer moon void of course phases happening this week, including on Friday when the moon goes into a void of course phase for over 5 hours. This is definitely leading us to be less action oriented and more introspective. And I'll talk more about this in my lunar forecast. And let's go ahead and dive into that portion of the forecast now. We are in a waning crescent moon phase at this time, meaning the moon is actually shrinking. It's getting smaller as we move towards the new moon. And as we close out the last full moon, we are starting to release what's ready for us to release. We're following the moon's guidance, and we are letting go. We are lessening our grip upon things that are no longer serving us at this time. These are things to reflect upon in your own life, that it may be time to deepen into yet another layer of release of what needs to go at this time in order for you to move forward on your path. Due to the planetary influences, this may have a lot to do with relationships. I will talk more about that in the planetary aspects portion of this forecast. However, just start to be reflective of what can you loosen your grip on, what can you let go of. It is not a time really to be activating anything new. It is a time to soften and to be more reflective. And we start the week on Monday with the moon being in the sign of Taurus. And the moon enters the sign of Taurus at 2:24 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also start the day on Monday with a 2-hour, 12-minute moon void of course. So let's start with the moon void of course, since we have several days this week with these longer moon void of course periods. It creates a tone for the overall energy of the week. The moon void of course is a time when the moon is not making any aspects, any connections with other planets. And it's very unusual for the moon to not make connections with other planets. It's the fastest moving luminary in the sky. It only spends 2.5 days in a sign. So as you can imagine, it is quickly going through in the course of the month all of the signs of the zodiac. And therefore, as it does this, it's often making conjunctions or squares or oppositions to the planets that are elsewhere in the zodiac. And this is very common, and the moon is our most personal luminary as well. It's closest to us here on Earth, and as it makes these connections, these are deeply felt. That is why the moon represents our feelings and emotions. And that is why we are so stimulated by the moon's interactions with its various planets, as well as the moon's phases. When the moon is full, most people recognize a certain energy and a chargedness that the moon carries at that time. So when the moon is not making any connections and it's in the void of course phase, we want to follow the moon's lead, because there's no energy that's energizing any actions, any big moves that we may take at this time. And so on Monday, we do start with a moon void of course phase before the moon moves into the sign of Taurus. And this very much could set the tone for the day. And because we do repeat this moon void of course phase elsewhere in the week that I will discuss, it's very much going to be carrying the theme of moon void of course through the week. And it's not a big week for taking big action. And we have quite a lot of retrograding planets right now anyway. So taking big action during retrograde seasons is not something that's always recommended. When the moon moves into the sign of Taurus, this is a time when we will find our security, which is what the moon would represent, in things that make us stable and things that bring us stability. And that's represented by the sign of Taurus. So during this time with the moon in Taurus, we are going to want to find what brings us stability. And we can often be very resistant to change. We want to be careful not to be too resistant so that we're not growing, because for sure being outside of a comfort zone can lead to growth. However, we want to really know when that time is right. There's a time for all things. There's a time for growth and there's a time for stability. While the moon is in Taurus, we can focus on allowing the changes that maybe foster our security, that will bring us more security. And that can be a good way to focus your energy on Monday and Tuesday, as we will have the moon in Taurus during those days. It's a great time to relax. It's a great time to indulge your senses in this Taurus energy, and do things that are just really satisfying your senses. Surround yourself with beauty. Take care of yourself. Have a nice bath with some nice smelling essential oils, perhaps. You could very much take the turtle's pace during the Taurus moon and be slow and steady if indeed there are things you need to get done, which is likely the case. Life doesn't stop just because the moon is in Taurus. Just remember to take breaks and, have a yummy treat for yourself. That's a great way of indulging your senses. Taurus rules the throat and the different parts of the throat, the vocal cords, the thyroid, and that is what governs what it is that we say. So at this time, while the moon's in Taurus, you can be considering what needs to be said, what needs to be released vocally, what do you need to communicate that will help you let go of whatever it is that you're wanting to surrender. And perhaps even consider what needs to be said or release that will bring you more security, make you feel more stable. So those are some reflections that you can have at this time if you want to take out your journal and really work with this Taurus moon energy. Now on Wednesday, we again are going to be having a moon void of course phase. This is going to take place before 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning, and the moon void of course will be taking place for 2.5 hours. However, as I've mentioned, this energy can very much set the tone for the entire day. On Wednesday, we also have the moon moving into Gemini, and it will stay there through Friday evening. Moon in Gemini is a very active moon. It's a very mentally stimulated moon. And even though we do have this moon void of course phase, it might be difficult to take a break and just allow yourself to surrender the energies around, making decisions and making things happen. However, it might be good to guide that impulse towards being more mentally reflective at this time, and that'd be a great way to work with the energies of this week. Moon in Gemini is a more busy energy. It's a very social energy, but it does like the mind to be stimulated. So a good way to do this in a more passive or internal way could be to indulge yourself in reading a good book or learning something new, perhaps taking a online class. This is a great time to nourish the parts of the body that Gemini rules over. And Gemini rules over the shoulders, the arms, and the lungs. Some people even say it's any organ that we have two of, because Gemini does represent the twins. But for the purpose of this podcast today, we'll just focus on the shoulders, the arms, the lungs. And breath work is often very good for Geminis to do, and perhaps that's a thing that can help you focus your mind more on these Gemini moon days by taking some breath work practice in. And you could also use breath work to release any burdens that you are carrying on your shoulders, in your arms at this time, and work on using the breath to let that go. Now on Friday, the moon void of course is actually even longer. We'll have a 5-hour, 25-minute moon void of course phase that will be happening in the afternoon. So Friday is definitely going to be a day where we're going to want to follow the lead of this moon void of course and not plan anything big, not take any big actions, especially in the afternoon. And then at around 6:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the moon is going to be moving into the sign of Cancer, its home sign. The moon loves to be in the sign of Cancer, and this is naturally a very introspective moon sign. It's a very emotionally attuned moon sign. You will not have any difficulty likely in this energy to feel your feelings, to tune into your emotional self, to do an emotional check-in. It's a great time also to retreat to the home and be domestic. During the Cancer phases, you may notice that sometimes doubts and fears and worries can come up, and this is a great time to work with those energy, to do some processing around these things. This week in particular, as I mentioned, with the retrogrades and aspects happening, is a great way to really look at what's bothering you and what's going on potentially below the surface. So that's a great energy with the Cancer moon that we'll be having through the rest of the week, actually, that you can use this energy to help you process what's going on. It's a great energy to nurture yourself and others, and to do inner child work. So those are the lunar energies for this week. We'll now move into the planetary aspects. Our first major planetary aspect is happening on Wednesday, when Mercury in the sign of Virgo trines Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. Mercury is the planet that rules our logic, our mental space. It rules communication. And Jupiter is a planet that enhances, and it also can be a planet that represents our beliefs. It can represent our higher self. And at this time with this trine, this is a very positive connection that these two planets are making. And it could be that we receive big insights from our higher self, or even good news on Wednesday. Jupiter is going to really activate this mercurial energy and may enhance your desires to get practical, because Mercury is in the sign of Virgo and Jupiter is in the sign of Taurus, which really emphasizes the practical nature of these two signs. And you may want to get practical things accomplished. Virgo is very much a sign that can be very detail oriented and accomplishment oriented as well. This is also great energy for writing. If you have any big writing projects going on, scheduling them to happen around Wednesday would be a great use of this energy. The next big energy that we have happens on Saturday at 2:12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we have the Sun in Leo trining Chiron, one of our many retrograde planets, in the sign of Taurus. Chiron is the wounded healer, and in our own natal charts, Chiron represents our wound. And it's a great thing to get to know the nature of your wound, because anytime there is a transit to the transiting Chiron or to your own Chiron, that is potentially an activation for your wound energy. And with this particular transit where the Sun is trining with Chiron, this is a very supportive transit as well. This can be the easing of the pain we have around our wounds. This can make us very focused or inspired about how to heal or have a breakthrough in how we can heal. It could also be how we can heal others, because if we really want to understand the Chiron energy, again, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. So not only is it a place where we can understand our wound, but it's where we can understand our capacity as healers. And so we can maybe become a contribution to others in this energy. It could also be the healing of some of the deeper, more psychological aspects around our wound, around our feelings of vulnerability, potentially, and even our sense of overwhelm regarding our wounds. Perhaps in this energy, this could be a lightening or a lifting of these heavier psychological feelings around our wound energy. On Sunday, we have the Sun in Leo conjunct Venus, another one of our retrograde planets, also in the sign of Leo. And what this does is it will focus our attention on relationships. So we're already all very relationship focused at this time, with Venus being in retrograde. But with the Sun positively aspecting Venus, it's more of an activation, maybe more of a personal, deeper reflection on relationships. And we can ask ourselves in this energy, what's worked with relationships? What is not working right now? What ships have sailed that no longer are aligned with me right now? Because one of the big things that can happen during the Venus retrograde is that we can see a return in past relationships that we ended for whatever reasons. Maybe it's an ex that comes back. It doesn't have to be a romantic partnership. It could be a business partnership. It could be a family relationship. So at this time, it's a great idea to reflect, is there past energies of relationships that have come back? And what's the tone of that for you? Is that feeling heavy, or is that feeling refreshed? A lot of times when we have relationships that return during retrograde energy, it's re-establishing reasons why we have ended or parted ways. So while there may be parts of ourselves that may want to start back up or reconnect, that's something that you'll want to be very, very careful about evaluating. Because oftentimes it's the pattern that you had in the particular relationship, or the lesson that was learned in the particular relationship, that ultimately is coming back for your reflection. Remember, at this time, we do also have the nodes that have shifted. I do have a podcast on this if you want to search in my Substack for that. And we have the North Node, what we're aiming towards in Aries, which is very self-oriented, which is looking out more for the self, which emphasizes our sovereignty. And the South Node and what we're leaving behind is in Libra. Libra is very much about relationships. So at this time, we need to reflect on any relationship coming back very carefully to evaluate, is there a pattern that I had with this relationship that I really need to leave behind? I need to just heal. I need to evolve beyond this. And perhaps the relationship is just coming back to remind you of where you're not going, where you've been, and some of the lessons that you have learned. A few questions that you can reflect upon if you are indeed one of the many people who are working with past relationships coming back. And by the way, this doesn't have to be a physical encounter in the 3D matrix. You could simply have gotten a phone call from someone from the past. You could maybe hear of them from another friend, through the grapevine, so to speak. Perhaps in some other way, maybe like a contractual way, they are coming back, especially if it's a business partner. So it doesn't have to be a face-to-face meeting. And it doesn't have to be someone that's from like the very, very distant past. It could have been a few months ago. It could have been last year that you first met them, and somehow they're popping back up. So a couple questions you could ask is, what's being triggered? What's actually being triggered? What emotions and feelings are actually being brought up by the return of this relationship? What is asking to be resolved at this time? Are we feeling any pressure with this relationship? Does it feel light, breezy, and easy, or does it feel overwhelming? Are these pressures around those Libra South Node values, those maybe lower vibe Leo energies that would trigger things like codependency or ways of being when we don't honor ourselves and we put ourselves second to relationships? In other words, there are some relationships maybe that we've had where we've been more of a martyr perhaps, and we've been very helpful to others, but it hasn't quite helped us. These are things you can ask yourself at this time. And just in general, what is the relationship theme? What is the relationship pattern that this is bringing up to be healed and reflected on? And this very much could pull in your Chiron wound energy, as we do have the sun in the chart for this week making aspects first to Chiron, then the very next day to this Venus relationship element. So we're very much tying them in together in the energies of this week. There's very much a healing that wants to happen for us regarding relationships. I'm going to end by saying that I'd love to invite you to my upcoming class on these Chiron energies. This is a part of my own chart that I have deeply explored, and I would like to share with you some of the connections in the Chiron energy that I have made and help you to work more with your own Chiron. If you're interested in learning more about your personal Chiron, I invite you to email me at courtneybuk@gmail.com and let me know that you'd like to join me for this class, which will take place on October 3rd. I believe I'm going to have this at 7 p.m. I haven't put anything on my site yet. I'm just giving you guys the heads up about it. If you are interested, it will be a $40 class. It will include a Zoom presentation on the Chiron energies by me, where we will look at the Chiron archetype. We will look at how it shows up in the various signs and houses. And some of the aspects and what they can share with us regarding the energies of Chiron. So, however Chiron is aspected in your chart, you'll want to be able to read into those energies as well. They're just as important as the sign and house that your Chiron is in. I will also be holding this class as a workshop. And so if you do decide to take the class, you can submit your chart if you choose to be used in the class as an example. And then also we will have a Telegram group where you can submit your chart for others to help you work through some of the understandings in your Chiron placement. So we're going to be helping each other read the energies of our Chiron wound. It's perfect timing because Chiron has gone into retrograde, so we're all naturally reflective of the Chiron energies at this time. And Chiron will be retrograding through the end of the year. It goes into a very long, about 6-month retrograde every year. So if you're interested in joining me, please do save your place by emailing me. Happy to give you more details on that too if you have questions for me. That is it for this week's overview of the Astro energies. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll be back next Monday as always. Take care. Thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. And if you have any comments you'd like to leave, I enjoy hearing from you and would love to communicate with you in the comments to hear how the energies are landing for you. And if you happen to have a friend who you think will enjoy this podcast, please do share it with them. I'm back every Monday with your weekly overview on my Substack account at courtneyingham.substack.com.